Carey.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, this is Dr. Sean Carey, and I'm with
Dr. Bill Moss.
and we're so excited to see you and talk with you for episode number 2 of Beyond the Practice. And this is a really exciting one. This is why healers choose to heal. There are many different types of healers in this world, but what got you started on the path? What you got started into this role of being a healer for somebody else? So both Dr. Bill and I have pretty cool stories that we want to share, and hopefully they resonate with you guys. So, Dr. Bill, how did you get started on this path?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I want to say is that I think oftentimes whatever type of healing we're looking at, sometimes we forget like people had a journey usually into the healing work, the healing professions, right? They had a direct experience that gave them a desire either through the self or through somebody that they knew close. Because I'm sure you might feel this as a chiropractor, like people will come in sometimes and they don't feel like you could possibly know what's going on with them because we've achieved at least some level of health at this point in our lives, and sometimes people forget that backstory, and I think it's one of the most important parts to kind of even come back and continue to share in the chiropractic world and in the healing world. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's wild to look back and to that version of yourself
Yeah.
that was in pain and was struggling so long ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, that helps me to have a lot of compassion with the people that I work with
Yeah.
because the different things they struggled with, I've struggled with many of those things too.
Absolutely. And I feel like my story has been coming up a lot more often lately, where I've been, not just talking about why I became a chiropractor, but the whole kind of progression of who I am. I started as a special education teacher prior to deciding to go to chiropractic school and then deciding to do healing work in addition. And then with that, now, we both teach classes, we do healing work. And all of that, I look at my life and I'm like, well, I was being prepared
Yeah.
in many ways to be able to handle uh, what I'm doing today. So, for me, I don't even know. I was thinking about this before the episode. Like, how much do you even know about why I became a chiropractor, and how much do I know about you? And I feel like I know more about the healing work and
Yeah.
how your entry into that. But I'm curious to hear about your chiropractic story then as well. Um, for me, I became a chiropractor. Because I had a direct experience that kind of changed my life. When I was 7 years old, I was struck by a car. I was with a sitter and my sister, and I was crossing the street, and I was actually struck by a motor vehicle right from the side. And that summer, I started to develop some health challenges. So I was a fairly healthy child up to this point. And that summer, I obviously experienced some pain from the accident, and it kept me out of sports, and I had a concussion. So they did all these precautions. But about 2 months later, I developed asthma. And from asthma, that turned into seasonal allergies. And basically, all through my childhood, through high school, I had seasonal allergies, asthma. And I also had pain from time to time that kept me out of sports and school. And I was a kid that like missed a lot of days of school. Like I remember like playing video games and getting to stay home. And finally, when I was 18, I had the opportunity to go on a European tour. And those high school European trips are like intense. You're in a bus, and then you're sleeping on the bus, and you're sleeping in a new hotel. And we went to like 4 countries in 8 or 9 days, maybe 5 countries.
Oh,
It was intense. So when I got home 2 days later, I couldn't get out of bed. I woke up and I just couldn't move. And my mom, who was in the healthcare world, she was an X-ray tech. She's like, well, we could take you to the emergency room, or let's try chiropractic. Like she had always been curious. She was actually would frequently listen to a chiropractor on the radio, which plays into part of my story down the line. That very same chiropractor, but she took me in, and he did the workup, and I got adjusted, I think, that day. And by the afternoon, I could exercise, I could move. And it was such a miraculous, being helped by my mom carried into basically the office to the
Yeah.
point where I could exercise. So my first experience with chiropractic was very profound in that internally I felt the magic. But that's what I used it for. Like I used chiropractic from pain relief and as an athlete in college. And I didn't really see the beauty of what I was capable of
Yeah.
from an individual healing perspective until my senior year of college. I right before my student teaching, I started to develop these debilitating anxiety and panic attacks that sent me to the emergency room, and I was hospitalized. They did all these tests on me, and they were like, well, we don't know what's going on with you. So I had dizziness, anxiety, racing heart rate. I felt like I was going to pass out. So then I basically, the next 30 days, had a gamut of testing where they did MRIs, MRAs, EKG, EEG. I got sent to every doctor, and everyone found that I was okay, and everything, all the testing was good. And I was suffering. I was taking an emergency medication every day to get through it. I was getting ready for student teaching, and I wasn't great. But during that time, I would come home to my area
Mm.
in Reading, Pennsylvania, and I would just go see my chiropractor because I liked it and
Yeah.
I was home. And on those days, I felt different inside of my body. Like I actually didn't have to take the emergency medication, but I didn't really tell anybody about this. I was
Mm.
feeling it. That was kind of it. So for the next year, I managed my anxiety with antidepressants, anti-anxiety. And about a year later, I woke up, and I wasn't under regular chiropractic care, and I had pain again. And I found a person close to where I was teaching, and I told him my story when I went in that day with pain, and he heard about the anxiety in the past, and also I told him a little bit about how I felt better. And I got under regular care, and over the course of the next 6 months, my anxiety dissipated, my pain went away and resolved. I didn't have asthma, I didn't have allergies. Like I just saw myself like heal.
Mm.
And in addition, I got better at the marathon. I was a competitive runner, and I saw performance gains there. And I was kind of hooked, and I just started asking questions about healing and why this happened and how the body worked and what was it about the nervous system. And finally, one day he was like, "Hey, have you ever considered being like doing this for a living?" And I was like, "No, I never considered it."
Mm.
And those were big words because that's all it took. I started doing the research, and I decided like this is something I want to give a go. And I
Yeah.
ended up planning for the next year and a half, and there it was. I went to chiropractic school, and now I've been in practice for 12 years at this point. um and I probably met you halfway along that journey. So
Yeah. It was about halfway.
yeah, so when people come into my office and they're like, "Oh, well, Dr. Moss, you don't know what it's like to
Yeah.
suffer and go from doctor to doctor." It's like I joke with people that I'm an expert in mystery illness because to
Mm.
everybody else, it seemed as though, oh, it's just in your mind. But it taught me a big thing about the mind. Who cares? Even
Yeah.
if that was my mind, um, it was powerful enough to like really create suffering in a
Yeah.
very primal physical way. So I'm glad to have had that experience now in hindsight because it's definitely allowed me to connect with people and understand. So yeah.
What an amazing story. I haven't heard your story like that before. I heard like I remember you'd share with me the anxiety piece of it,
Yeah.
but not that whole the allergies and
Yeah.
not the asthma too.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, I
sorry.
struggled with a lot of breathing stuff growing up, and that's kinda hard when you're a competitive runner, you know?
Yeah.
I relied on having an inhaler nearby at all times. There were seasons that were better, seasons that were worse, but ultimately, what I learned to do was trust the nature, the trust that I can heal, and
Yeah.
that wasn't there. That was
Yeah.
never there. The whole experience from 7 through 22 was basically like I put my faith in medicine, and listen, we'll probably get into this on other episodes. There's a time and place for everything. And I
Yeah.
wholly believe that and still utilize medical care when absolutely necessary. But I didn't have any trust in that my body had an inner wisdom that knew how to do things,
Yeah.
and I neglected it. So it was really profound and helped forge what's going on now, this day and age. Yep.
What a wild ride it's been.
Yeah, it's been wild. So I don't think I know how or why you got into chiropractic in the first place, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I struggle with pain as well. So for me, it started like when I was growing up. I have a brother who's about 4 years younger, and I grew up in a rural area. It was very like rough and tumble, always playing sports, and we'd ride our bikes out, and like every day after school we'd be playing sports on the town common and that type of thing. So there's I was very physical, and that led to me playing like pee wee football. So when I was 10 or 11 years old, I started playing football, and shortly thereafter I started getting these headaches. And at that time, I didn't really understand the severity of the headaches I was having. My dad had migraine headaches.
Mm.
So he had broken his neck when he was younger, and
Oh
he
wow.
would have these atrocious migraine headaches where 2 or 3 days, like every couple weeks, we'd have to be totally silent in the house. Lights would have to be off because he was just like in so much pain with the migraine,
Yeah.
and any noise, any light would make it worse. And I started having headaches too. Uh, and then time goes on till I'm in college, and I had a low grade headache like every day.
Wow.
So when somebody said they had a headache, I thought it meant that they had a headache that was really bad that day.
Mm.
Like I really had no understanding that people could have days without headaches. It was just such a normalized part of my life.
Yeah.
And then when I was 17 years old, I had another sports injury. I tore my left labrum playing street hockey. I fell and with my arm outstretched and hit a rock, and that caused a whole nother like host of symptoms to develop. So now I was
Mm.
having neck pain and headaches and shoulder pain. And I went to the medical route, and I did physical therapy, and I did massage, and I did like had an MRI. And
Mm.
there wasn't really a lot that was recommended to me. It was just like kind
Mm.
of like, oh, you just have to. We don't really have an answer for you. Just kind of live
Yeah.
with it. And that's basically what I was doing. So I was living on over the counter painkillers when the pain was bad. But I was doing this at like 18 or 19 years old.
Yeah. Wow.
And at that time, I was studying nutrition exercise science at the University of Maine at Farmington. And I was working as a personal trainer at the gym there. And we had a health fair one day.
Mm.
And one of the people who came and had a booth at the health fair was this chiropractor. And I knew nothing about chiropractic,
Yeah.
but they were really nice. I knew them from coming into the gym. And they had this device where you like stand on it, and it shows you if you're leaning more to one side or the other. And then
Mhm.
if your shoulders are, it's called a SAM machine, like if your shoulders are
Right.
tilted one way and your hips. And I remember standing on that, and I was like 34 pounds more on one side.
Mm.
And the chiropractor was like, he's like, you really have an issue that we should address. And I liked him. I went to his office, and I vividly remember he took X-rays of my neck,
Mm.
and my head was tilted like
Mhm.
significantly.
Yeah.
And he showed me the X-rays. It's like, here's normal. Here's where you are. And I was like, no wonder that I've been having headaches and I've been having all these problems. And I was just flabbergasted that nobody had mentioned that to me before. Like
Right.
that my head was literally tilted. And I remember I had my driver's license picture from that, my first driver's license picture. My head and my shoulder were like that, and it was just, and I'd look back at that and be like, oh my God, I was walking around like that all the time. And this was before Facebook. So it
Yeah.
was like I'd go and get my old photo albums. And from when I was a child, I was walking around with my head like that. And nobody once mentioned it to me until I went to the chiropractor.
So
Yeah.
funny. They're
It
so
it just blew my mind. It was like, how did nobody pick this up before and mention it to me? Because it seemed so,
Yeah.
it made so much sense.
Yeah.
Um, and then he gave me my first chiropractic adjustment, and the very first chiropractic adjustment, the headache I had for like 10 years went away.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was just
So
like this
wild.
cloud was lifted,
Yeah.
and it was the most amazing feeling. And it was like I think when people are in pain, you forget what feeling good feels like because
Totally.
you just learn to live with it. So it's like I didn't
100%.
realize I could feel that good,
Yeah.
So it was like for me being in chronic pain at 19 or 20, like that was just how I lived.
Yeah.
And to not have that constant pain, to have that headache go away, it was like the clouds parted and the heavens opened up. Like it was just
It's
an amazing moment.
it's so true. I mean, like even to this moment in time, right? Like it's kind of
Yeah.
I want to say I'm like a baby when I experience pain again. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
like what is
yeah,
this? But it kind of teaches you a lot each time it occurs. Yeah.
absolutely. I feel the same way. Like most of the time I don't experience physical pain. My body
Yeah.
does pretty well.
Mhm.
Like I was in way more pain at age 19 than I am now.
And then after that point, like, how was your development into, like the decision process of like, yeah, I'm gonna go do this, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna learn how to do it.
Well, I went to I was seeing that chiropractor, and it was similar to you in that like I was just getting these really amazing experiences, and it wasn't
Mm.
just the pain. Like I remember was sleeping better.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
my stomach felt better. Like my body just felt more relaxed. And I even remember like this wasn't something that anybody told me to do, but it was just part of my own decision making. Like I started to feel really good after I would be adjusted.
Yeah.
So I'd time adjustments before big events. So if like I had
Yeah.
like a big final
Yeah.
exam or something like that, I'd make sure I was adjusted close beforehand
Yeah.
because I just had this feeling like it helped me to be my best. And I got to be the chiropractors I had were wonderful. Dr. Jen Roberts and Dr. Jason Steinhauser in Farmington, Maine, and
Mm.
uh, they just I remember Dr. Roberts like looked at me one day and he's like, "Have you thought about being a chiropractor? Like you'd be a really good
Okay.
chiropractor." And
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it, but with that question, he really inspired me.
Yeah.
And then I went and did an internship at their office because I was still skeptical. I wasn't sure if I was like the only one who had this amazing healing result, you know, like if it just worked for me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see like to see more application of it. So I worked as an intern there, and I got to see all sorts of people like having incredible responses. And I
Yeah.
just totally fell in love with chiropractic as a healing art. And
That's awesome.
yeah,
That's awesome. You know what's really cool about both of our stories, and I think this is super relevant, is the fact that we basically chose it because we worked with somebody that we ended up really liking and trusting,
yeah,
and that's where a lot of times healers get, I think, sometimes very not possessive, but the idea like it's this lack consciousness, like,
yeah,
oh, there's chiropractors everywhere, there's healers everywhere. But the reality is like that's an important part of the relationship is to be
yeah,
like trust the person that you're going to work with. And it's interesting that we had this similar level of trust where somebody just decided to open their mouth and say, I
yeah,
think you'd be good at that. And I can't say I've had a ton of people I've met while taking care of that I'm like, you should go do this.
yeah,
And I haven't. I know there's some colleagues that we have that send people to school, and
yeah,
they have a lot of people that become chiropractors. But I felt like that was really this sacred moment that was like really delivered through that person that was like, you should do this, because I hadn't either considered it at all up to
yeah,
that point.
yeah.
There was no part of my mind that was like, let's entertain this idea, and then all of a sudden I'm doing it. So
Yeah. Yeah, it was, like, nobody in my family had went to chiropractors, you know, it was
yeah,
something that I'd heard more of the negative things about or the, like, negative, stereotypes, you know, about chiropractic,
totally.
but I hadn't heard anything really good about it, and I had never looked either,
Yeah,
and
I, I totally my it's funny. It's almost like the aversion. My family up to the point of me going, no one had gone.
yeah,
And in addition, I remember being a kid. My family was from Pittsburgh. Like my extended family lived in Pittsburgh. And I just remember leaving my grandmother's house one time as a young child, and we're getting in the car, and my parents are having a discussion how my uncle and aunt took one of my cousins to the chiropractor when he was a baby,
mm,
like 6 months, less than 6 months old, because he had colic, and totally, cleared up right away. And she was such a big advocate. And they were talking about how my grandma was like so anti chiropractic. And like,
yeah,
I remember this conversation, like where I was sitting in the back of my parents' car as we're pulling out of Pittsburgh and getting ready to go home. And I remember like, wow, that just stayed with me. So there was
yeah,
something in there that just hung out long enough for me to like see and be curious enough to start to move into the profession. And I don't know about you, but I found through chiropractic it's very much in essence there's similarities in my understanding of the human being and the human body that has now lent its way into the spiritual healing work that you and I do up to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they share a common thread in the way I view chiropractic is that it really is about optimizing human function.
Yeah.
And it's very sad that the public perception is about pain.
Yeah.
I think at this point in time, the public views chiropractic as a really effective modality that helps with pain,
Hmm.
especially back pain or neck pain or headaches.
Hmm.
But chiropractic at its whole and at its origin, it was never about pain. It was about helping people to function at a higher level, to take care of this human frame and nervous system, so that we can get through life in a much better way, a much more
Yeah.
optimal way.
And I believe many healing practitioners are speaking the same, similar message going
Yeah.
forward now, that the idea of, the immune system and function and coordination and connection, those words can be applied to many aspects of what we do, especially when you're working with the nervous system. You're just talking about a system that's communicating to a degree and advanced nature that we can't fully comprehend all the aspects of it, but there's a respect that's coming through that allows
Yeah.
people to see, like, that's because people took those things that chiropractors help with. Like, I had asthma and allergies and pain and anxiety. Like, what's the common thread? Oh, your chiropractor can, quote, cure everything. But it's like,
Yeah.
no, what you're describing is function. And everyone understands that a well-functioning person is going to be healthy.
Yeah.
Like, that's what health is. It's coordination and function, not just the absence of symptoms. So, that paradigm started to replace my old thought patterns, and really helped me kind of evolve into what I do now, in addition to the other healing work that we're going to get into as well.
Yeah, I fully agree, and it was, I think that the public is at this point where people are really starting to get ready for the message,
Yeah.
about, taking care of our health beyond just pain.
Yeah.
And I think COVID actually helped with that somewhat, because, like, right there on the TV with everything, is that it was very clear that the more sick somebody was, the more different disease processes they had going
Yeah.
on, the
Yeah.
different comorbidities, the more likely they were to die from COVID.
Yeah.
And like when it first came out and all the publicity there,
Hmm.
and but we didn't really take the opportunity to talk about the things that make you healthy and function at a higher level to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. And even if it was there, people weren't having a conversation. Maybe it was out there. People knew many different ways. Uh, and I also think, like, there's this balance coming into play now where maybe you can see this too, is like, there's so many ways to be healthy, and
Yeah.
people have, like, exhausted all of them, and then they're not healthy. So it's
Yeah.
like this obsession for health has actually started to spill into, like, more stress,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
stress. So
And there's even a condition for it, right? Isn't it, like,
yeah,
orthorexia is the condition
I
where
think
the
so.
obsession with health.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
one of the threads that I think chiropractic and the energetic work that we'll talk more about share is this piece about adaptability, like
Yeah,
helping you to be a more adaptable being, like with chiropractic on a
yeah,
physical and neurological level,
mhm,
and with the energy work really on a spiritual and soul and emotional level.
yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because I'll share my story
Yeah.
into the healing arts beyond chiropractic, but you were the person that introduced me to this work, and I'll talk about how much aversion I had to doing any of it along
Yeah.
down the line. But tell us about, like, how you went from chiropractor into the energy healing world, that we are both currently also practitioners of.
Yeah, it was quite a twist that I wasn't expecting, because I didn't the energy healing work was never something that I really foresaw myself doing or was really
Mhm.
even interested in.
Mm,
In chiropractic school, I was very much interested in functional neurology. That was like
mm.
the kind of the specialty that I was pursuing. My mother had a brain tumor when I was young. My father broke his neck, had terrible migraines. So I was just like very curious about how the brain worked.
Mm. Yep.
And I'm in practice. I had been in practice maybe like three or 4 years, and this woman started coming to my practice, uh, and she would grab me. She was actually bringing her elderly mother for care. She would drive her to the visit, be with her in the room. And this woman would grab me after I adjusted her mother and would literally like grab my face and be like, "Do you understand that you're guided? It's very important that you understand that you're guided." And she'd say all these things that was honestly like too much. It was just very very intense and not what I was uh,
Yeah.
really in the mood for. I was in my mode. But
Not
we're
in
in
the
this
mood
like
for
closed room. I didn't know how to get out of the situation. So
You're like cornered against
yeah,
the
yeah,
wall. I love it. People are like reading you without. Yeah, it's funny.
yeah. So she then went to my assistant at the time, and she would tell my assistant these deeply personal things
Mm.
that there was just no way that a person could know. She'd say things about the aunt's spirit that had passed, and like the way somebody had would go to the front desk and say, "I'd like to make an appointment for Wednesday at 10 o'clock."
Yeah.
She'd walk up to my assistant and be like, "Oh, your aunt's spirit's here with you when I come in," and it was stuff like this, and but it was things that my assistant had never shared, but it was 100% accurate.
Mm.
And it started messing with my mind because it's like, what are the chances of somebody like of this being a random occurrence? It
Yeah.
was like, 1 in 1 billion. And to make a long story short, my assistant went and did a session with this woman, and she was just glowing after.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, and it was like her soul was like 1,000 pounds lighter. Then I went and I was like, well, I want that too. I want my soul to be 1,000 pounds lighter. I
Yeah.
went and did that, and it was like my world came crashing down.
Mm.
It brought up a lot of uh, 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 traumas and difficulties in areas that like I was not like I was trying to live life through this narrow range,
Mm.
and it was something that really brought up to my awareness. For example, like I was in a relationship that ended like very, very right before I did a session with this woman, and when the relationship ended, the woman was like, "You have a really blocked heart." And I was like, "No, I don't. I'm a chiropractor. I hug everybody. That's you projecting onto me."
Yeah.
And then I do a session with this woman. She's like, "You have a really blocked heart from your childhood." And it was like, but when she said it, I was like, maybe that is true.
Mm.
Maybe I do. And I allowed it in a different way. And it really started this process for me of like realizing that I didn't, there's many other things that happened as a result of that session, but it made me realize that the world was not how I thought it was,
Mm.
because I thought I understood the world by understanding science and the brain, and it
Yeah.
gave me this framework of like, I understand reality. Reality fits in this box. I get it. I'm good. Everything makes sense to me. And it
Yeah.
was like this foundational security, like on a deep psychological level, was stripped away.
Mm.
And then all these wounds and traumas were brought to the surface, but I had no idea like how to really heal them.
Mm.
And I reached out to a friend of ours, Dr. Peter Amlinger, when we were at the Dynamic Essentials chiropractic meeting a few months later, and I kind of shared with him what was going on. I was like, he's an amazing chiropractor who had also studied with Native American elders a lot,
Mm.
a very spiritual, very gifted man. And I told him what was going on, and he helped guide me through a meditation. And in that meditation, I this memory came to the surface that I had totally blacked out from my childhood.
Mm.
It was basically like the night before my mother had brain surgery, and they were trying to prepare us that she might die or not.
Wow.
So it was this really intense trauma because it happened very suddenly. This was like
Wow.
my mother had zero symptoms, worked as a teacher's aide. One day, a chair was thrown at her head. She ended up going to the hospital getting stitches. We thought she was fine. The next day, she came back from the hospital, or she was home. My brother and I got dropped off at the school bus, came inside, and my mother was like screaming in tongues, running into walls.
Wow.
So I ended up calling my dad was working at General Electric. I called my uncle. He sent the police over. They took my mother by ambulance to the hospital, and they did an MRI and found a massive brain tumor,
Wow.
totally asymptomatic until that trauma. And
Mhm.
they're like, we have to operate within now.
Mm.
But even with operating now, there's about a 50-50 shot that she makes it.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, so that night, like I
Wow.
had that trauma, a part of me had basically blacked out.
Mm.
And there was a part of me that walled off as a result of that experience.
That's intense. Yeah.
And then I'm doing this meditation with Peter, and all of a sudden I just like burst into tears. And there's like, I don't know if I have ever cried that hard in my life, and snot's pouring down, and it was just this freeing of trauma from my soul,
Wow.
and from my psyche in a way that I'd never experienced anything like that.
Wow.
And from that moment forward, I was like hooked on energy work, but I started doing these meditations on a daily basis, and I was having this amazing experience with it. And what ended up happening maybe 6 months later was I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, and I
Mm.
didn't know what that was.
Mm.
Essentially, what happened is I was meditating, had this experience that it was like almost like I had a seizure, but it was total bliss. And I came back from that experience, and I could literally see the color off like trees and plants and things like that.
Mm.
And my dreams became incredibly vivid, and I started becoming very clairvoyant, and like all these wild things were happening with my inner awareness,
Mm.
but it was making it very hard to function in daily life.
Mm.
And I was almost like too sensitive. I had become too sensitive like very quickly, so like 0 to 100, and I had no idea what happened to me. And I was deeply worried that I was losing my mind at that time, because it
Mm.
was like it was like my senses were so hyperactive, and
Mm.
I had no idea how to shut them off. And I knew that if I went the traditional route, I would be medicated, and just kind of like put to sleep neurologically,
Yeah.
and that it was something spiritual that had happened, but I didn't know. I didn't know what or where to look.
Mm.
And then, basically, to make a long story short, it was a really difficult time for me. I really struggled,
Mm.
and I started praying. And I was like, God, if you're out there, please help me. I don't know what's going on with me. Like, I feel like this is something good, but I don't know how to function. Like, please
Yeah.
help me.
Yeah.
And that led to me finding the mystery school.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know all the details about that. So that's super intense, especially with like
Yeah.
the meditation and opening up. And it's interesting. I've had lots of experiences with people that come
Yeah.
to me and have a similar experience that you're describing, where it's
Yeah.
just uncalculated, almost awakening of the senses,
Yeah.
and don't know what to do with it. But your stories actually really helped me assist people, because
Awesome.
there's what people don't realize is like, I'm sure we'll get into this on other episodes, but a lot of the mainstream ways of inducing like spiritual
Yeah.
uh connectedness in this very intense way is hard on the energy system.
Yeah.
It's hard for the person. So and I think I always kind of knew I was a really sensitive individual from a very young age, in sensing people and energies and rooms and feelings, but I didn't really understand that, or pushed it aside and didn't really connect with it until I started to just become open and let some guards down to understand more of my gifts.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I wasn't a person who was looking for energy work at all. And back to the earlier point, like the
Yeah.
only reason I did any energy healing was because I trusted you.
Yeah.
We met basically because of mutual friends that we talked about on the last podcast. But you just offered me a session. You were like, "Hey, I'm going to do a life activation session for you," when we were in Denver. And I was like, "Let's do it. That sounds great. I'm excited." Because I trusted you. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm open. I've always been an open person. So if you were going to chant and do weird stuff, I'm like, okay with it. I
Yeah.
was okay with it. Right. But it wasn't like that. And afterwards, I remember you said things like, "Bill, people are gonna like see that you're carrying more light." And right around the same time, I was starting to get some teaching opportunity within the chiropractic profession. So you were like, "Hey, this is gonna help you bring more of yourself forward. It's gonna
Yeah.
help you with opportunities, and people are gonna see the light that you carry when you speak." And I was like, "Whatever." And very much within moments or days after that session, I realized just speaking in social situations, I had this like confidence and clarity and stability. And I was a person up to this point who had suffered I was a chiropractor, I had suffered all that anxiety. And I remember just feeling like I didn't even know how much anxiety I still had
Yeah.
until after it was gone.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to step forward in many new ways. But what really caught my eye, if you will, was how over the course of the next 3 months, I had wild opportunities. I was teaching in South America, Europe, the United States. I helped establish and open an upper cervical clinic in Barcelona. And I was having, it was just all
Mhm.
these opportunities were like unfolding in front of me. And I could see, like, some of the things you had described, I could see it kinda happening, even though I was really quite skeptical of, like, what this was gonna do for me, and I really liked it. And then I remember we did a couple additional sessions, and,
Yeah.
um, kinda like you saying, things from my childhood were coming back up that I didn't fully address, and I could see from a different angle.
Yeah.
Um, and, I early on felt like I could see myself from a different perspective. And I think
Mhm.
that's, when your energy shifts, you people look at themselves differently, right? Because they have a
Yeah.
new awareness.
Yeah.
And there's many reasons for that from a complex standpoint of what and who we truly are. But I just started to observe myself from like an internal place and an almost external watching myself. And it allowed me to see a greater picture. Um, and because I trusted you, I felt more grounded than I ever had. Now I see like spiritual practices, what kept me
Yeah.
from many of them was the
Yeah.
fact that the people I saw utilizing them, I always felt like they were trying to escape their life.
Yeah.
And for me, this tool, life activation and then initiation, and really, the mystery school really helped me um, live into my life, I like to say, you know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
not avoid it, but really more fully understand who I am and my purpose and just my unique gifts. And that session really helped me see that. So I had a new level of trust of what this stuff could really do for me. Um, and just, one other piece to that was, you talked about chiropractic and what it was in essence. Like, I was
Yeah.
looking for the philosophy of chiropractic
Yes.
years before. The body's self-healing, self-regulating. There's an internal innate intelligence that runs the human being, and then there's this universal collective intelligence that we're all part of. So it's like the macro and microcosm. And when I started to find the philosophy of the mystery school and what we study, it was like, well, I was looking for this within the chiropractic philosophy as well. And so for me, it really started to give me a more complete understanding of the totality of um, the complexity of everything we work within. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. And one of the things I love that you shared is basically when we work with these tools, when we work with the life activation and spiritual initiation, it helps you to explore the heights and the depths
Yeah.
of life.
It's
So
awesome.
it doesn't just bring you to the heights. It's like we're a hermetic lineage, which one of the things that talks about is basically as above, so below.
Yeah.
So if you want to go higher, you also have to be able to go deeper,
I
and you
love that.
really can't escape that with this work, and it makes you
Yeah.
do both.
Yeah.
And when I first started, I think when I did your session, I really at that time in my progression, I really viewed the life activation, some of these tools, as like a energy adjustment.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah.
and now I realize I've developed a much deeper respect and understanding for the energy body.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, because we talk about the physical body and how complex it is, like
Hmm.
the different systems, the hormones, the biochemistry, the different web of interconnectedness of our physical structure. The soul and energetic bodies are like that too. So they're just as complex, and it's possible to make them work so much better, so that you can have a much more integrated the soul and spirit much more integrated into your life.
Hmm.
Live life more alive and with more joy and with more miracles unfolding.
Yeah. And that's really there's a completeness to that because
Yeah.
we know so many ways to work on the physical nature of who we are. And,
Yeah.
I think I loved exploring that, the teacher, the learner in me, and
Yeah.
even the chiropractor. But, when we work within chiropractic, you start to see glimmers of just how somebody can heal beyond expectations, right?
Yes.
And I know this show we're going to explore that with the healers that we bring on, with the people and the stories, and even just discuss a lot of the stories that we've had with people. But there's you just get to a certain point when you've seen enough people heal in a certain way that you're like, it's a little bit beyond the physical.
Yeah.
It's a little
Absolutely.
bit beyond the physical. And we could have called this podcast that, Beyond the Physical.
But we could have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even like the people that we meet for healing, like the chiropractor that you met that inspired you, and the chiropractor that I
Yeah.
met that inspired me. Like I think it was more than just I'm very grateful that that chiropractor was open enough that he was able to really like communicate maybe a message from spirit for me,
Yeah.
something that I just need to hear at the right time.
Yeah. And I believe most people have had those moments where
Yeah.
another person, and that's why the healing journey isn't a singular one where it's just yourself. We're all serving each other on a to some degree, and through that we really start to know so much more about ourselves. And I feel really blessed to have had people open their mouth and inspire and encourage. The chiropractor opened his mouth and, let's go do this, and you were like, hey, I want to provide you this session, and I was like, let's
Yes.
do this. And those little small words that move energy,
Yeah.
help shift things for people. And you never know what that encouragement's going to do. So that's one of the main, I guess, reasons I wanted to personally continue to bring this work, and in this format, in this podcast.
Absolutely.
Going forward, we are going to be interviewing different people on their healing journey, how they became healers, what their niche is, what the amazing stories about the people that, because there's people everywhere, and
Yeah.
the world needs to know that the healing is multidimensional, it's multifaceted. And just because you're doing one thing, there's plenty of other ways in which we can start to evolve and develop. So we're excited that you're going on this journey with us, going a little bit deeper each week. And we look forward to sharing more within our next episode.
We'll see you next time.